She's your daughter, not my responsibility. That's what Nathan said before slamming the car door and vanishing into the night with his suitcase. Off to Madrid, smiling, while Melissa held their crying son in her arms, standing on a porch that wasn't hers anymore. If you've ever been disrespected by someone you love, this story will speak to your heart. I still remember the way her voice shook when she called me that morning. She didn't even ask for help. She just said, "We're okay, Mom. Just figuring things out. But a mother knows when something is wrong." And when I drove across 2 cities and found them under that bridge, her holding Liam tight under a threadbare blanket, trying to smile like it was a picnic, something broke in me. Melissa, who once danced barefoot in the kitchen while I braided her hair. Liam, who called me Granny Bird because I used to whistle stories to him at bedtime. And Nathan. He was sipping sangria, tagging beach photos, living his freedom, all while his wife and son were sleeping beside a concrete pillar. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just wrapped them in my coat and said, "Come home." But it wasn't that simple. Pride doesn't let a woman cry easily, especially not in front of her child. Melissa sat on the edge of my couch like a guest, not like the daughter I raised. Her hands trembled as she poured Liam's cereal. No milk, just dry flakes the way he liked it. He didn't ask for toys or cartoons. He just sat close to her, holding her sleeve like it might disappear. I watched them from the doorway, trying not to cry. "Did he hit you?" I asked quietly. She shook her head. "Not with his hands." That was worse. It's strange how silence becomes its own language. The way she flinched when the phone buzzed, the way she avoided mirrors, the way her shoulders stayed curled inward like she was still trying to make herself small. Nathan had drained their accounts before leaving. Took her name off the house deed a month before. Said he was investing in himself. He left no note, no plan, just an empty apartment and an eviction notice on the door. Melissa didn't tell me. She just took Liam and ran. And here she was, in my house, in shame. I wanted to be angry, to say, "I told you so." But instead I just sat next to her and touched her wrist. Her skin was cold, paper thin. "Mom," she whispered, "I don't want to be a burden." I looked at her, this woman who once clung to me after every nightmare, and said, "You're not. But he will be. One day." She didn't answer, but I saw the first tear fall. That night after they fell asleep, Liam curled up on the pull-out bed, Melissa still wearing her jeans like she didn't trust comfort. I went into my bedroom and opened the top of my old cedar closet. There behind my winter sweaters and the wedding dress I hadn't touched in decades was the green box. Inside were things no one else remembered. Melissa's baby bracelet, the ribbon from her first school play, a crumpled drawing that once read, "I love you, Mama," in shaky letters. I hadn't opened it in years. I took out the photograph, one of her and Nathan just before their wedding. Her eyes were full of light. His smile looked sincere. I traced her face with my thumb, then set it down, face down. Beneath it was something else, a key, a small brass key tied to a ribbon. It unlocked the old garden shed behind the house, the one that hadn't been opened since my husband passed. I'd kept it locked all this time, like a little museum of the past. His tools, my planting gloves, shelves of dust and memory. I wrapped the key in a piece of cloth and placed it on my nightstand. I didn't know why yet, but something told me that she would matter again. Outside, a car alarm wailed in the distance. Inside, the house felt like it was breathing again. Tired, yes, but breathing. Tomorrow we'd face the world, but tonight I let myself remember who she used to be. Morning brought the smell of burnt toast. Melissa tried, bless her. The toaster at an angle, Liam giggling at the smoke. But it was clear she hadn't cooked in a while. Or maybe she was just out of practice being cared for. "I forgot how fast this thing burns," she muttered, waving the bread like a white flag. I didn't say anything. I just handed her butter and turned on the fan. Liam climbed onto the stool at the kitchen island, drawing with a blue crayon on the back of an old grocery list. He was humming, happy, as if sleeping under a bridge hadn't just happened 3 nights ago. Children are strange like that. They adapt faster than we do. Or maybe they just hope harder. Melissa finally sat down with her coffee. She hadn't put on makeup, no earrings, no attempt to be the perfect wife Nathan used to expect. She looked real. Tired, yes, but softer somehow. "I called his mother," she said suddenly. "She said it wasn't her business." That was the first crack, the first piece of humiliation she let slip out. "He told her I was unstable," she continued, voice low. "Said I was taking medication, that I was unfit." I clenched my jaw. Melissa never needed medication. She needed safety. She needed love. "I don't know who I am anymore," she whispered. I reached across the table, touched her hand. "You're still my daughter. And you're still Liam's whole world." She didn't cry this time, but her fingers held onto mine. The next afternoon, while Melissa napped and Liam played with an old box of my Tupperware lids, pretending they were flying saucers, I stepped outside. The garden hadn't been touched in months. The summer had been harsh, the grass patchy, the rose bushes dry and thorny. But I noticed something else. The fence behind the shed had a hole, small but widening. A plank had rotted clean through. It looked like time itself had been slowly peeling it apart. I don't know why, but I stood there for a long while, staring at that broken slat. Something about it mirrored what I felt. How quiet damage doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just gives way. I unlocked the shed. It smelled of oil, dust, and old summers. My husband's tool belt still hung on the wall. I touched the fraying strap. I could almost hear his voice. "Don't fix it with anger. Fix it with patience." I found a spare plank, a hammer, and some nails. It took me 3 tries to steady my hands, but eventually I patched the hole. When I turned around, Liam was there, barefoot, holding a dandelion. "What's this place?" he asked, curious. "Just a room full of things that used to matter." He nodded as if that made perfect sense, then handed me the flower. "This one's for Mommy, but I think she's sad." I crouched beside him. "She is, but she's trying." He looked at the shed, then back at me. "Can we make it pretty again?" "Yes, baby, we can." Later that evening, after Liam had fallen asleep with a half-colored page clutched to his chest, Melissa walked into the living room holding a pink envelope. "I found this in the diaper bag," she said, handing it to me like it burned. It was addressed in Nathan's handwriting. I recognized the sharp edges, the way he always slanted the letters, like everything was urgent, even when it wasn't. Inside was a folded sheet of hotel stationery. The words were few, but they cut deep. "I need space. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. Liam will thank me later. Nathan." No apology, no signature of love, just instructions. As if she were a problem to be managed, Melissa sat down on the rug, knees pulled to her chest. "He said I was smothering, that I didn't let him breathe." I sat beside her, letting the silence settle. "He wanted a child," she continued. "But not the work, not the nights, not the worry." Her voice cracked. "He said he felt like a prisoner." I looked at her. My girl who used to sleep beside me during thunderstorms, who once whispered she wanted to be a teacher, not a wife. And here she was, broken by a man who wanted freedom more than family. "I stayed, Mom," she whispered. "Even when it got bad, I stayed." I took her hand. "And now you're free," I said gently. She looked at me, eyes wide. "Then why does it feel like I failed?" "Because you loved," I thought. That's what makes it hurt. On Sunday morning, Melissa insisted we go to church. She hadn't stepped inside one since before Liam was born, but I could tell she needed it. Not the sermon, maybe, but the silence, the space to breathe. She wore a cardigan too big for her frame and tied her hair back with one of my old scarves. Liam held her hand tightly as we walked down the aisle, eyes wide at the stained glass windows. We sat in the back row, like strangers in our own lives. Halfway through the service, during the quiet hymn before communion, I noticed Melissa close her eyes. She wasn't singing, she was praying, and then, just barely above a whisper, I heard it. Please don't let him grow up thinking he wasn't wanted. It wasn't meant for anyone to hear, but I did. My throat closed. Melissa, who'd been humiliated, abandoned, robbed of peace, was still worried about Liam's heart. Not hers, not her dignity, just his little boy's soul. After the service, an older woman approached us, a neighbor from years ago, Mrs. Garrison. She glanced at Melissa, then at Liam. I heard, she said gently. If you ever need anything, I'm just across the street. Melissa gave a small, stunned nod. It was the first time someone looked at her with kindness in months, and as we stepped out into the morning light, I realized something. She wasn't invisible anymore. The world was beginning to see her again, not as Nathan's wife, but as Melissa. 3 days later, it was Liam's birthday, 5 years old. No cake, no party hats, no wrapped gifts, just a pancake shaped like a bear, a hand-drawn card from me, and a single blue candle we found in the junk drawer. He was still thrilled. I made a wish, he whispered after blowing it out. Melissa asked gently, "What did you wish for?" He grinned. "That we can stay here forever." Her face collapsed for a moment, just the muscles around her eyes like the weight of his wish was too much to hold. I tried to distract him with an old board game, but Melissa stayed quiet most of the morning. She folded laundry with her back to us, blinking too often, chewing the inside of her cheek, just like she used to when she was hiding something as a teen. Finally, when Liam was napping, she turned to me and said, "I called a lawyer." I froze, not because I was against it, but because it meant something had shifted. I need to protect him, legally. If Nathan comes back, she swallowed. I don't want him just taking Liam like he's a suitcase. Her voice was steel wrapped in fear. I nodded. Good. She looked at me, eyes glistening. Do you think I'm strong enough? I reached over, touched the edge of her jaw. Melissa, you didn't just survive. You're rebuilding with nothing but your bare hands. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Outside, wind stirred the dry roses in the garden. That night, as I washed the dishes, I heard Melissa gasp from the living room. Not a scream, just a sharp breath, like something had punched her in the stomach. I dried my hands and rushed in. She was staring at her phone, pale, eyes fixed. Her thumb hovered over the screen. It's a voice message, she said, barely above a whisper. From him. Nathan. She didn't press play. She just handed it to me. I listened. His voice was smug, relaxed. There was laughter in the background. Clinking glasses, maybe a party. Just wanted to check if you've calmed down. I'm thinking we can make some arrangements when I'm back. You don't need to make this difficult. Liam will be fine. He's resilient. Melissa was frozen, like her body had turned to stone. He talks like Liam's a car, she murmured. Something he can just lease. I deleted the message. She didn't stop me. That's when it hit me. She was done hoping. Before, even in the hurt, some part of her waited for an apology, a change. But now? Now she saw him clearly. He's never coming back for us, she said, almost relieved. No, I replied, and thank God for that. Melissa let out a long, trembling breath. Then almost timidly she smiled. Not because anything was okay, but because clarity, even painful, is a kind of freedom. And sometimes, freedom sounds like silence after the last cruel word. 2 mornings later, I found Melissa in the backyard with her sleeves rolled up, scrubbing the shed door with a bucket of soapy water. I opened the kitchen window. You're going to ruin your nails. She laughed, a real hoarse laugh. Too late. I lost those years ago. By the time I joined her, she'd cleared the cobwebs from the corners, dusted the shelves, and even organized the old jars of nails and screws. Liam was nearby, digging in the dirt with a spoon, building what he called a treasure trap. "What are you making this into?" I asked gently. She looked around, brushing her dusty hands on her jeans. "I don't know yet, but I need something, a space, to make things, fix things, maybe fix myself." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. She found my husband's workbench and traced her finger over the initials he carved. C&M, 1984. "I forgot he used to build birdhouses," she said. "He built one for you when you turned 6, I reminded her. "You cried when the wind knocked it down." She nodded, remembering. "That's the last time I believed things stayed where you put them." That line hung in the air. Heavy. Real. I put my arm around her. "Maybe they don't stay, but maybe we learn to build stronger." She didn't speak, but she wiped her eyes, then began sweeping again. Each stroke a quiet act of reclaiming. The shed, once forgotten, was becoming hers. That evening, after the dishes and after Melissa had gone to shower, Liam crawled into my lap with his blanket and whispered something I wasn't ready for. "Granny Bird, is Daddy dead?" The question stopped time. I held him tighter. "No, sweetheart, he's not dead." He looked up at me with those big, searching eyes. "Then why doesn't he come back?" I paused, choosing every word like it might shape his whole heart. "Some people forget how to love the right way," I said softly. "They get lost inside themselves. But that's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong." He was quiet for a moment. Then he whispered, "Mommy cries when she thinks I'm sleeping." I nodded, stroking his hair. "She misses what she hoped for." "That's a different kind of missing." He nodded slowly, not fully understanding, but trusting me anyway. "Can I still draw him pictures?" he asked. "Yes, baby. You can draw whatever your heart wants. That's yours." He handed me a crumpled sketch, stick figures holding hands. One was smiling, one had a suitcase. "Maybe he'll remember me if I send it." I kissed the top of his head. "Maybe. But even if he doesn't, we remember you. Every day." He fell asleep on my shoulder. Melissa came out later and saw him there, peaceful, mouth slightly open, his drawing tucked against my chest. She didn't say anything. She just knelt down, kissed his forehead and whispered, "We'll be more than what he left behind." The next day, a car pulled into the driveway. I watched from the window as a tall man stepped out, suit too sharp, eyes too smug. It was Ethan, Nathan's older brother. Melissa saw him too and froze like someone had opened a wound. "I don't want to talk to him," she whispered. But he was already at the door. I opened it. "Carolyn," he said with a rehearsed smile. "Can we talk?" I didn't move. "About what?" "Melissa and Liam. Nathan's concerned." I stepped outside, shutting the door behind me. "He sent you instead of coming himself?" Ethan chuckled. "He thought it might be easier, less emotional. He just wants things to be civil." I crossed my arms. "Civil? After abandoning his family under a bridge?" His smile faltered. "Look," he said, lowering his voice. "Nathan's got a new opportunity, a fresh start. He's asking Melissa to let him have shared custody, eventually. He'll provide child support once things stabilize." I looked at this man, this polished messenger, and saw right through him. "This isn't about Liam," I said. "This is about control." He sighed. "Carolyn, she has no job, no home. Be reasonable." I stepped closer. "She has a spine, and that scares him." I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I simply closed the door in his face. Melissa was standing at the hallway corner, eyes wide, breath shaky. "You were listening?" She nodded. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said. And for the first time, I believed her. That evening, Melissa sat at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea. I noticed she kept glancing at the old clock above the stove. "Tick, tick, tick. I used to check the time every day at 6:30, she said suddenly. "That's when he used to come home." I didn't say anything, just listened. I would light a candle, warm his dinner, make sure Liam was quiet. Every day, even on days he didn't show up. Even on days he reeked of cologne that wasn't mine. Her voice didn't tremble. That made it worse. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a wristwatch. "Nathan's. I kept it," she said. "Don't even know why. It stopped the night he left." She set it on the table, its face cracked, the second hand frozen. I looked at it, then at her. "You kept it because you needed to remember that you didn't imagine it, that it happened, that he really walked away." She nodded. "But now, I don't want it." I picked it up, ran my fingers over the cool metal. Then I handed it back. "Then break it, throw it, or bury it. Whatever helps you, take the power back." She stood, walked outside into the garden, and dug a small hole under the rose bush with a spoon. She placed the watch inside. No ceremony, no words, just a silence full of meaning. When she returned, she smelled of earth. "I think I'm done measuring time by him," she said. So was I. That afternoon, while organizing the hallway closet, I found an old family photo tucked behind a broken frame. Melissa, Nathan, and baby Liam at his first birthday. Everyone was smiling, but when I slid the photo out, a folded paper fluttered to the floor. It was a letter, my handwriting. I sat on the floor and read it, heart pounding. It was from years ago, a letter I'd written but never given Melissa. "If he ever makes you feel smaller than you are, remember this. You were whole before him, and you'll be whole after. Love should lift, not break. You are not his mirror. You are your own light." Tears filled my eyes. I had written it the day she told me she was pregnant. I had seen the fear in her then, the hesitation behind her smile. But I stayed quiet, thinking love would save them. I handed the letter to her later that evening without saying a word. She opened it slowly, read each line with trembling lips. By the end, she was crying. "You wrote this before I married him?" "Yes." "Why didn't you give it to me?" "Because I didn't want to plant doubt, but I should have planted strength." She folded the letter neatly and slipped it into her journal. "No one's ever said those words to me before." "You needed them," I said. Even back then. Melissa exhaled, deep and steady. "I think I'm finally starting to believe them." That night, she slept with the letter under her pillow. A week later, while Melissa was at a legal aid center filling out forms for custody, I waited outside with Liam, watching traffic and trying to keep him entertained with sidewalk chalk. That's when she appeared. A woman in a navy suit stepped out of the courthouse across the street, paused, and crossed over. She looked around my age, but with that stillness some people carry. The kind that says they've seen too much and still stand tall. "Are you Melissa's mother?" she asked gently. "I am." She extended her hand. "My name's Ruth. I'm a family court judge, and Nathan's name came up in a different matter. I recognized the surname, remembered your daughter from a case I observed last year." My heart fluttered with caution. "I'm not here officially," she continued, "but off the record, tell her to ask for supervised visitation only if it ever comes to that. And tell her she's not alone. Some of us do notice." I stared at her. "Why would you help?" Her eyes softened. "Because I'm also someone's daughter, and because my father wasn't kind." Liam tugged my arm, drawing clouds on the cement. Ruth knelt beside him. "That's a nice sky." "It's for my mom," he said proudly. "She likes blue when she's not crying." The woman's smile faltered, just a little. She stood, nodded once, and walked away. And I stood there, stunned. The world, cold as it could be, still had quiet allies, people who saw truth even when no one else did. The next morning I found Melissa sitting in the hallway with an empty picture frame in her lap. The glass had been removed. Just the border remained. "No more pretending," she said, not looking up. She had taken down the photo of her and Nathan from the mantel, the one that had stayed there through everything. Birthdays, arguments, silence, as if keeping it up meant something could still be salvaged. "I kept it for Liam," she said, "so he'd think we were still whole." She ran her fingers along the wooden edge. "But we weren't. We were cracked from the start." I sat beside her. "What are you going to put in it?" She shrugged. "Maybe nothing. Maybe it's okay to have one frame that just holds space. I looked at her, really looked. Her eyes weren't red. Her shoulders weren't slumped. She wasn't collapsing. She was opening. Liam's not asking for him anymore, she said quietly. He talks about school, about your garden, about building a mommy fort in the shed. She laughed softly. A mommy fort? I smiled. He's building you a kingdom. She placed the empty frame on the table near the front door. Not as a shrine, not as a warning, as a reminder. Space doesn't always mean something's missing. Sometimes it means there's room for something new. Melissa stood, rolled her sleeves up and said, "Let's paint the shed this weekend." I nodded. "What color?" She smiled. "Not blue. Not today." Saturday came with sunshine and the sound of brushes swishing through buckets. Melissa chose yellow. Not a bright, sugary yellow, but a soft, honeyed tone. The kind that looks like morning even in the late afternoon. She tied her hair up with that same old scarf, wore my gardening jeans that sagged at the knees, and whistled quietly as she worked. Liam dipped his tiny roller in a puddle of paint and declared the shed a happy house. By noon, the scent of wood and color filled the yard. "It's been years since I finished something," she said, pressing her palm against the freshly painted wall. "You finished a marriage," I replied, half smiling. She chuckled. "Unfinished would have been staying." Then she looked at her hands, covered in streaks of yellow, fingers stained to the nail beds. "I used to scrub every little mark off my skin," she said, "to look perfect for him." She lifted her hands toward the sun. Now I wanted to show. There was something sacred in that moment, like a baptism not of water, but of intention. She wasn't just painting a shed. She was declaring herself visible, capable, present. Liam ran around us, squealing with joy, dragging a string tied to a stick like it was a kite. And I stood there, watching my daughter reclaim herself, one brush stroke at a time. The world hadn't changed, but she had. And somehow, that made everything feel possible. That evening, just after Liam fell asleep with yellow smudges on his cheeks and paint on his socks, Melissa's phone rang. She stared at the screen. Nathan. The name alone used to steal the color from her face, but not this time. She didn't tremble. She didn't flinch. She just stood there, let it ring, and waited. When it stopped, she sighed, not with fear, but relief. "He's going to try," she said, "to worm his way back, to play the victim, to make it seem like I ruined things." I nodded. That's what cowards do. They rewrite history. She looked at me, her voice steadier than I'd ever heard it. But I've got mine written down now, in letters, in paint, in Liam. She walked over to her purse, pulled out the legal envelope, custody documents ready to be filed. I'm not afraid of him anymore. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. Peace without the performance. She slid the envelope into her drawer, then returned to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and leaned on the counter. "You know what I realized?" she asked. "What?" "I thought surviving him was the hardest part, but it's not. It's choosing not to go back when it gets quiet, when the loneliness whispers." I moved closer, touched her arm. "And what are you choosing now?" She smiled. "To listen to my own voice instead." Outside, the wind rattled the chimes softly, not as a warning, but as a song. It happened on a Tuesday, ordinary as dishwater until it wasn't. Melissa had taken Liam to the grocery store. Just milk and apples, a short walk. But when she came back, her hands were shaking. She stood in the doorway holding the bag like it weighed more than it should. I saw him. I felt the air change. He was by the checkout line, with a woman, younger, laughing like he never laughed with me, holding wine and flowers. I took the bag from her hands. "Did he see you?" "Oh, he saw me." She sat on the bench by the door, like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. "I froze, Mom. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there." Liam waved at him, called out, "Daddy!" Her voice cracked. He looked at us like we were strangers, said, "Sorry, kid. You've got the wrong guy." Silence. He said it like Liam was someone else's child. My throat tightened. My chest burned. "I wanted to scream," she whispered. But Liam just looked up at me and said maybe he forgot. I knelt in front of her. He didn't forget. He abandoned. She nodded slowly. "But not all of us forget, right?" "No," I said. "Some of us remember. And we stay." That night, Melissa didn't cry. She sat with Liam until he fell asleep, then wrote something in her journal with the slow focus of someone turning pain into record. Sometimes dignity doesn't rise with a roar. Sometimes it rises from silence and never sits back down. The next morning, Melissa didn't mention the store. She buttered toast, tied Liam's shoes, and watered the rose bush like nothing had happened. But I knew better. There's a kind of quiet that only comes after you've been erased in public. A silence that stretches out inside the body like a cold room. I watched her moving around the kitchen with the precision of someone clinging to routine just to feel the floor beneath them. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked gently. She didn't look up. "No, not today. Today I just want to be." So we let the silence breathe. I pulled out a puzzle from the hall closet, one we'd started years ago and never finished. She sat with me on the floor while Liam napped, and we found edge pieces like lifelines. Halfway through, she said quietly, "He used to tell me I was boring, that I sucked the joy out of everything." I didn't respond. She picked up a puzzle piece. "Funny how I felt more alive in this little house with nothing than I ever did in that big apartment with him." We kept piecing the sky together. And when the last cloud clicked into place, she smiled for real, tired but real. Sometimes healing doesn't announce itself. It's not a dramatic moment. It's a soft one, a silence that doesn't hurt, a moment where being alive and being seen is enough. She leaned her head against my shoulder, and for the first time in years, she rested. A week later, a white envelope arrived in the mail, heavy, glossy, with gold lettering. No return address, but I knew the font. Nathan's mother had always loved fancy paper. Melissa opened it slowly, her fingers careful, as if the envelope itself might bite. Inside was a card. "You are cordially invited to the engagement celebration of Nathan D. Calloway and Isabel Renee Walsh. Saturday, 7 p.m., formal attire." Melissa stared at it, unmoving. I waited. Then she laughed. A short, breathless thing that didn't reach her eyes. "He sent this, on purpose." I took the card. "He wants to provoke you, or break you, or both." "I think he wants to prove he's winning," she said. "Look how fast I replaced you. Look how shiny my life is." She stood up, went to the kitchen trash bin, and dropped the envelope in. But something in her still shook. "You can't make a life out of what you run from," I said. "That kind of happiness has termites." She nodded. "Still, it stings. Not because I want him, but because I gave so much to someone who didn't even flinch throwing me away." We stood there in the quiet. Then she said, "I won't go." "I know," I replied, "and I won't cry either." "You don't have to. You already mourned the truth of him." She poured herself tea. "He's marrying someone new. I'm building a garden shed." And I said the only thing that mattered. One of those things will last. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen and found a new drawing on the fridge, stuck up with a magnet shaped like a sunflower. It showed a little house with a big sun, a woman with a ponytail holding hands with a small boy. Above them, in shaky red crayon, Liam had written, "Me and Mommy, home." Melissa stood by the stove, flipping pancakes. "You see it?" she asked without turning. "I do." Her voice was steady. "He used to only draw all of us, the three of us, even after Nathan left. But now," she paused, flipped the pancake. "Now he just draws me, and sometimes you." It hit me then. the invisible healing happening without fanfare. The drawings had changed before the words did, before the courts, before the paperwork, before she even dared hope for joy again. "He's not erasing his father," I said. "He's centering you." She nodded, wiping her hands. "I thought I had to give Liam a whole family to make him happy. But it turns out I just had to show up, every day, with love." Liam walked in, dragging his blanket, his hair wild from sleep. "Granny?" He yawned. "Do pancakes make moms happy?" I smiled. "Yes, sweetheart. Today they do." He climbed onto the stool, reaching for the syrup. Melissa placed a stack in front of him, then kissed the top of his head. Outside, the wind had softened, and on the fridge, 2 stick figures stood tall, together and enough. That Sunday, Melissa came out of her room wearing a red dress she hadn't touched in years. It wasn't flashy, just simple, elegant, with a neckline that reminded me of who she used to be before the silence made her shrink. Liam clapped. "Mommy, you look like a superhero." She laughed, spinning slowly, her arms out like wings. I just stared. "You haven't worn that since before the wedding," I said gently. She nodded. He hated red, said it made me look too bold. She smoothed the fabric along her hips. I used to believe that shrinking made me lovable, that quietness meant safety. She looked in the hallway mirror, not checking her figure but seeing herself, really seeing. "I don't need to disappear to be accepted," she whispered. I stood behind her, our reflections side by side. "No, baby, you never did." She turned toward me, eyes bright. "I'm thinking of applying for that teaching assistant job at Liam's school. It's part-time, but it's a beginning," I said. Her smile was quiet, almost sacred. That afternoon, we walked to the school together, dropped off a letter at the office, and watched Liam kick a ball with the other kids. Melissa stood with her arms folded, sunlight catching in her hair. "You think it's too late to start again?" she asked. I looked at her. Red dress fluttering, scars invisible but present, strength blooming. "No," I said. "I think it's just in time." And for once, she believed it too. 2 weeks later, Melissa stood in front of a judge. Not a trial, just a hearing. Custody arrangements, legal clarity, a necessary step toward peace. Nathan didn't show up. His lawyer did, smug, disinterested, barely glancing at Melissa. But she stood tall. She wore navy slacks and a white blouse. No makeup, no jewelry, just calm in her voice and truth in her hands. I sat behind her, hands clenched, trying not to breathe too loud. The judge asked routine questions. Melissa answered with composure. "Yes, I have stable housing. Yes, I'm the primary caregiver. No, there is no current contact with the father. Yes, I would accept supervised visitation. For Liam's sake, not his." Her voice didn't waver once. Then the judge asked, "Is there anything you'd like to say for the record?" Melissa took a deep breath. "I loved him. I did. I loved the family I thought we were building. But he chose to leave. Not just me, but our child. And now, I choose to stay. To be enough. To protect peace, instead of chasing someone who doesn't want to be found." Silence. Even the clerk looked up. The judge leaned forward, eyes softening. "I believe you," she said. "And more importantly, I see you. It was done. Custody confirmed. No more waiting for permission to be her son's safe place." Outside, Melissa exhaled deeply. She turned to me. "He didn't win." "No," I said. "He never even played the right game. That night we didn't throw a party. There was no champagne, no streamers, no loud music. Just Melissa, Liam, and me. 3 bowls of spaghetti, garlic bread, and a lemon pie that cracked in the middle because I rushed the cooling. But it was perfect. Liam called it the best dinner ever. Melissa lit a candle in the middle of the pie. Not for a wish, but for a mark. A moment. A line between before and after. "To all the quiet days that held me," she said, raising her glass of iced tea. "And to the loud ones I survived. We clinked glasses. She looked around the small kitchen, the scratched table, the humming fridge, the flowers Liam picked from the yard in a jelly jar. "I used to think justice had to be dramatic," she said. "A courtroom win, a confrontation, someone begging for forgiveness." She looked down at Liam, who was happily twirling noodles with a fork. "But sometimes justice looks like this. A meal I cooked, a son who's safe, a heart that no longer flinches." After dinner, she put on an old record, Billie Holiday. She danced with Liam slowly, arms wrapped around him, humming. I sat back and watched, the candle flickering between us. No one needed to say it. This quiet, imperfect joy was the justice. Not revenge, not proof, but presence, peace. The kind that isn't loud but lingers. And in that moment we were whole. The next morning I opened the top drawer of my dresser and found something I hadn't touched in years. A small velvet box, corners worn, the clasp slightly tarnished. Inside was a necklace, gold delicate with a tiny bird charm. It had been Melissa's 18th birthday gift. She wore it for years, until Nathan said it looked childish, and she tucked it away like so many other parts of herself. I walked into the kitchen, where she stood sipping coffee in Liam's cartoon mug. "You remember this?" I asked, placing the box beside her. She opened it, and for a second, I saw that same 18-year-old, the one who used to dream out loud on long car rides. Her hand went to her throat instinctively. "I thought I lost it," she whispered. "No," I said. "You gave it up." She nodded. "Because he didn't like who I was when I wore it." She lifted the necklace gently, the chain catching morning light. "Do you still want her?" I asked. Not about the necklace, but the girl who used to sing to the radio and draw stars on her jeans. Melissa fastened it around her neck. "I do," she said, voice firm. She was brave. I forgot that. Liam came running in with a dandelion. "For your necklace," he said proudly. "So it can sparkle more." She laughed, kissed his forehead, and said, "It already does." And just like that, something sacred was returned. Not just the necklace, but the self she had hidden. The following weekend, Melissa stood outside the shed with a paintbrush in hand, a plank of wood at her feet, and Liam beside her holding a small can of white paint. "What are you naming it?" I asked from the porch, drying my hands on a towel. She smiled, dipping her brush into the paint. "Not a name, a word." She painted slowly with care, the letters taking shape one stroke at a time. Enough. I felt it in my chest before I even read it out loud. Liam tilted his head. "Why that word?" Melissa crouched next to him, wiping a dab of paint from his cheek. "Because for a long time, Mommy thought she wasn't enough. Not pretty enough, not smart enough, not brave enough." He blinked. "But you are." She kissed his temple. "Exactly." She stood and stepped back to look at the word. Bold, uneven, and perfect. "That shed held my husband's silence," she said softly. "Now it holds my voice." I walked down to her, my feet crunching on the gravel path. "You've made something sacred," I said. "It's more than a space," she replied. "It's a truce. For me, for Liam, for every woman who forgot herself in someone else's shadow." She turned, her gold bird necklace catching the sun. "I don't need to be more. I just need to be enough." I reached out and held her hand, and under the word, painted in Liam's messy scrawl, he added, "My mom." That was all the proof she ever needed. It happened late one afternoon, weeks after the court hearing, as autumn leaves drifted onto the porch. Nathan. He pulled up in a rental car, sunglasses perched on his head, a faint cologne trailing behind him like a ghost of the man he used to pretend to be. I saw him from the window and stepped outside before he could knock. "Carolyn," he said, feigning warmth. "Is Melissa home?" "She is, but the woman you left isn't." He smirked, arrogant as ever. "I just want to talk. Maybe clear the air." I crossed my arms. "You lost that right in the rain, under that bridge." Before he could respond, the door opened behind me. Melissa stepped out. No fear, no makeup, no apology. She stood in the doorway, the gold bird necklace resting against her collarbone. "Nathan," she said calmly. "Melissa," he said, that salesman's smile flickering. "You look good." She didn't flinch. "I have nothing to say to you," she replied. "And you won't speak to Liam unless it goes through the court." He chuckled. "You're really doing this? Keeping him from his father?" "No," she said. "You did that. I'm just holding the boundary." His expression soured. "I made mistakes," he muttered. "And I'm healing from them," she said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She simply turned, walked back inside, and closed the door. That was the loudest silence I've ever heard. Nathan stood there for a few seconds, then left, and this time, no one watched him go with sadness. That night, after the unexpected visit, Melissa found something on her bed, a small wrinkled paper crane, folded from a page of Liam's coloring book. She walked into the kitchen holding it delicately between her fingers. "Did you see this?" she asked. I nodded. "Liam left it for you. He said it's to keep your heart flying." She smiled, eyes soft. "I used to make these for him when he had nightmares. I told him they were dream guardians." I watched her sit down slowly, the bird in her hand like a fragile truth. "It's strange," she said, "how something as small as this can feel stronger than an apology." "It is stronger," I said, "because it's made from love, not guilt." She traced the edges of the folds. "For a long time, I thought love meant staying, enduring, forgiving things that broke me." She looked up. "But now I see it in this. A child's hands, trying to comfort me without even knowing the weight I carry." She held the crane to her chest. "He's healing me in ways I didn't expect." Later that night, I walked past her room and saw her sleeping peacefully, the paper crane resting on her pillow beside her, just under the lamplight. She didn't toss or turn. She didn't wake in tears. She simply rested. Because when love isn't loud, it folds itself into tiny shapes and stays near your heart, where it can't be taken. It happened on a quiet Wednesday. Melissa and I were folding laundry together. Just towels and Liam's little socks that always seemed to vanish in pairs. The sunlight streamed in through the kitchen window, landing in warm patches on the tiled floor. We weren't talking about anything big, just groceries, the weather, a neighbor's cat who kept showing up on our porch like it owned the place. Then Melissa paused. She held up one of her old shirts, the one with the tiny tear at the hem, worn soft with time, and looked at me with something different in her eyes. "I'm proud of me," she said quietly. I didn't speak. I let the moment breathe. "I never said that out loud before," she continued. "Not once, not even as a joke." She folded the shirt with careful fingers. "But I am. Not for surviving him, not even for winning the custody case, but for the way I started showing up for myself." She looked at the line of clothes waiting to be folded, for doing small things with full presence, for making Liam laugh, for making space in my own mind again. Her voice was soft, honest. I used to think pride came after applause, after recognition, but now I know it comes in silence, in peace. I reached over, squeezed her hand. "You earned every breath of that pride." Outside, wind stirred the trees. Inside, my daughter reclaimed her name. Not the one she was given, but the one she gave herself. Worthy. That evening, Melissa's phone buzzed again. Nathan. Another missed call. No voicemail this time. Just his name, still saved in her contacts under Liam's dad. A habit left over from before everything broke. She stared at the screen for a few seconds. Then she turned it face down. "No," she said to no one in particular. Not angry, not bitter. Just final. "You don't want to hear what he has to say?" I asked. "I already have," she replied. "In all the ways he left, in every silent dinner, in every time he rolled his eyes while I cried." She stood, walked to the counter, and deleted the contact. Just like that. Not with rage, with release. I don't owe him an audience anymore. There was power in the simplicity of it. Not every door needs to be slammed. Some just need to be shut, gently, firmly for good. Liam wandered in with his toy airplane, zooming it through the air. "Granny Bird, I'm flying to the stars." Melissa crouched to his level. "Can I come with you?" she asked, smiling. He nodded, serious. "Only if you pack snacks. Space is hungry." She laughed, lifting him into her arms. "Then we better get ready." She didn't look back at the phone. Not once. Because sometimes the real victory isn't confrontation. It's choosing peace over the noise. Choosing forward over familiar pain. And in that quiet kitchen, with an airplane in hand and laughter in the air, Melissa moved on, for good. By early spring, the rose bush beside the shed, the same one Melissa had buried Nathan's watch under, started blooming. Full, bold petals. No more dry thorns. No more withering leaves. Just life. Liam ran through the yard barefoot, pointing. "Granny! Mommy! The flowers are waking up!" Melissa knelt beside the bush, fingers brushing against the buds. "I didn't think it would survive," she whispered. "The roots were so brittle I almost pulled it out." I crouched beside her. It just needed time and a little care. She plucked one blossom gently and held it up to the light. "This one's for the girl I used to be," she said softly. "The one who didn't know her worth." Then she picked another. "This one's for the woman I'm becoming." I handed her a third. "And this one is for everything you let go of." We placed the roses in a jar by the shed window. The one now painted enough. Later I watched her from the porch, trimming the vines, humming as she worked. Liam danced in the grass with a stick, pretending to be a knight. This wasn't the life she planned, but it was the one she rebuilt. No riches, no luxury, just dignity, earned day by day. And just before sunset, she turned to me and said, "This garden, it saved me." "No," I replied. "You saved you." The wind lifted the petals, and for the first time, the garden bloomed with more than flowers. It bloomed with her healing. That evening, after Liam had gone to sleep and the stars began pricking through the sky, Melissa sat at the kitchen table with an old envelope in front of her. Her journal was open beside it. The room smelled of chamomile tea and quiet. "I wrote him a letter," she said. I sat down. "Nathan?" She nodded. "Months ago, right after we left the bridge." She slid the envelope toward me. "I never sent it. I didn't reach for it. I waited. I poured everything into that page," she said, her voice steady. "The anger, the heartbreak, the shame. I wanted him to read it and feel every inch of what he did." She traced her finger over the flap. "But now, I don't need him to feel it." She opened the envelope, unfolded the letter, and read the first line. "You shattered the version of love I believed in." Then she stopped. "I used to think sending it would free me, but now I know. The freedom came from writing it, not delivering it." She stood, walked to the fireplace, and without drama or pause, fed the letter to the flame. We watched it curl, blacken, and disappear. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She simply turned, leaned against the mantel, and let out a breath I think she'd been holding since the day she said, "I do." No applause, no confrontation, just peace. Earned one word at a time, because sometimes the greatest justice is never needing to be heard by those who chose not to listen. One cool morning, Melissa asked me to drive. "Where to?" I asked. She looked out the window. "The bridge." I knew which one. The same overpass where I'd found her and Liam all those months ago, cold, hollow-eyed, humiliated by a man who called himself a husband. We pulled up beside it, engine idling. She stepped out, Liam's hand in hers. The concrete still bore the faint stains of old graffiti. The rusted rail, the chipped paint. Nothing had changed, except her. She walked to the exact spot they had huddled under. Back then with fear, now with purpose. I needed to see it, she said, quiet, to make sure I never forget. Not the pain, but the rising after. Liam was picking up pebbles nearby, oblivious to the weight of the memory. Melissa pulled something from her coat pocket. A small tin bird, the same shape as her necklace, only now on a keychain. She bent down and wedged it gently into the crack between two stones. A marker, she said. Not of shame, but of rebirth. She stood, her shadow falling across the ground where she once sat crying. I'm not angry anymore, she said, turning to me. I know, I replied. You outgrew it. She looked up at the overpass. Funny, she whispered, how the place that once broke me now feels like proof that I survived. Then she took Liam's hand again, and we walked away. No backward glances, just steady steps forward where healing met horizon. A week after the bridge visit, there was a knock at the door. Not frantic, not hostile. Just 3 simple taps. Melissa opened it. It was Isabel, the woman Nathan was set to marry. Young, polished, holding her purse like a shield. I'm sorry to come like this, she said. But I think you deserve to know. Melissa stepped aside slowly, cautiously. They sat at the kitchen table, same spot where so many tears had been shed. And I stood back, near the stove, quietly folding a dish towel. Isabel spoke gently. I found letters, she said, from before you left. Things he wrote to other women, bank records, manipulations, lies. Melissa didn't flinch. I believed everything he said about you, Isabel continued, that you were unstable, controlling, bitter. I was wrong. She looked down. I left him yesterday, called off the engagement. Melissa's voice was calm. You don't owe me anything. I do, Isabel said. You survived what I almost walked into. There was a silence then, long, still. Melissa nodded. Then take that survival and make it your boundary. Isabel wiped her eyes. You're stronger than I thought. No, Melissa replied. I'm just no longer ashamed. Isabel stood to leave. Thank you for hearing me. As the door closed behind her, Melissa exhaled slowly. I stepped forward, touched her shoulder. That was grace, I whispered. She nodded. I didn't offer it for him. I offered it for me. And that's when I knew. She no longer lived inside the story he wrote. One Saturday morning, Melissa and I went to the town market, baskets in hand, Liam skipping ahead between stalls of fresh bread and sunflowers. That's when we saw her. Cheryl, Melissa's childhood friend. They hadn't spoken in years. Not since Melissa had slowly disappeared into Nathan's curated world, where brunches mattered more than memories, and every friendship was a threat to his control. Cheryl hesitated when she saw us, but then she smiled. I almost didn't recognize you, she said. You look different. Melissa laughed softly. I feel different. They hugged. Not out of obligation, out of quiet relief. I thought I lost you, Cheryl said. You didn't, Melissa replied. I just lost myself for a while. They sat on a bench near the honey stand, catching up as if no time had passed. Cheryl asked about Liam, about teaching, about the garden. Melissa shared everything, not with shame, but with light. I have a shed now, she said, grinning. Painted it yellow, named it Enough. Cheryl laughed. Of course you did. Later, as we walked home, Melissa held a bouquet of sunflowers, her face flushed from sun and stories. I didn't think people would still want me, she admitted. Not after I disappeared. After I changed. I looked at her, the calm in her step, the warmth in her voice. You didn't disappear. You were just waiting for the right version of yourself to come home. And now? She had. It was a rainy afternoon when Melissa found the envelope. Not a legal one. Not from Nathan, but from Liam's school. Inside was a simple letter. We're pleased to offer you the position of teaching assistant. She read it 3 times before saying a word. Then quietly, she whispered, I got it. Her hands trembled. Not from fear, but from disbelief. I watched her sit at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd once cried over eviction notices and cold dinners. Now she sat holding a door that had quietly opened, not to escape, but to step into something new. "I didn't even think they'd call me back," she said. "You were always ready," I replied. "The world just needed to catch up." She laughed, brushing her hand over the letter like it was a fragile miracle. "This means I can walk him to school and stay, be part of it, help other kids like him." "No," I said softly. "It means you've stopped waiting for permission to live again." She looked at Liam, who was scribbling superheroes onto the back of a grocery list. "I'm going to frame this," she said. "Not because it's big, but because I did it. Me, not him, not anyone else." Later, she pinned the letter beside the enough sign on the shed wall. Rain tapped on the roof like a quiet applause. And inside, she stood tall, not because someone let her in, but because she built the door herself. On the first day of her new job, Melissa stood by the mirror adjusting her blouse, not for vanity, but to feel prepared. Liam was dressed in his favorite sneakers, ready with a packed lunch and a paper crown he made the night before. "You're the queen today," he said, placing it on her head with great ceremony. She smiled, eyes glassy. "Then I'll rule with kindness." Before stepping out, she paused by the front door, hand resting on the frame. She turned to me. "I thought I'd walk through this door one last time, years ago," she said, "when everything fell apart. I thought I'd never walk back with anything but shame." She looked around the home she helped rebuild. Now I walked through it with purpose. The air outside was crisp, leaves rustled. The street was quiet. And as she took Liam's hand, something struck me. It was the same door Nathan had once slammed shut behind him. Cold, final, selfish. But now, it opened for her, wide and slow, like it had been waiting. She didn't look back. She didn't have to. The door creaked softly, and for a second, I saw the full circle of it all. The place where she was once abandoned became the ground where she rose. The same threshold once crossed in humiliation now bore her triumph, and as it closed behind them with a gentle click, I whispered what I knew to be true. This house doesn't hold the past anymore. It holds her future. That night, after Melissa and Liam returned from school, both tired, both glowing, we shared tea and stories by the lamp in the living room. Melissa recounted how a student had hugged her for helping with a shoelace, how the staff welcomed her like she belonged, how Liam kept waving from across the hallway, proud to say, "That's my mom." The house felt warm, not just from the heater or the cinnamon tea, but from something deeper, like the walls had absorbed the joy and were holding it gently for us to feel. Later, after Liam was asleep and Melissa had gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room. I looked at the lamp beside me, the one that flickered on the day they came back into this house. I used to turn it off quickly, conserving, saving, always worried about tomorrow. But tonight, I left it on. I let it shine, not because anyone needed it, but because it stood as a symbol, a small, steady light that said, "We're still here, and we're okay." Through all the darkness, the silence, the cold under that bridge, the courtroom, the shame, she had found her way home, not to the past, to herself. The lamp hummed gently beside me, casting a golden glow across the walls. And I smiled. Because peace isn't loud. It's not applause or revenge. It's a light you no longer feel guilty for leaving on. The next evening, just before dusk, I stepped outside and found Melissa in the garden. The sky was turning that soft lavender blue, the kind that only lasts a few minutes, like a promise that doesn't need to be loud to be true. She was kneeling beside the rose bush, now blooming full and wide, the same one she once almost gave up on. Liam was running barefoot again, chasing a butterfly, his laughter echoing through the yard. Melissa looked up at me and smiled. "I used to think rebirth would feel big," she said, "loud, like a shout into the sky." She clipped a rose and held it to her nose. But it feels like this. Quiet, solid, rooted. She stood, brushing the soil from her knees. I'm not just surviving anymore, she said. I'm living. We walked together toward the shed, enough still painted across the front, faded slightly by sun but no less strong. She placed the rose in a jar inside, right beside the job offer letter, Liam's first drawing of their happy house, and a small photo of the two of them in the garden. This was her sanctuary, her evidence, her truth. As the last light stretched across the backyard, Melissa turned to me. Respect isn't inherited, she said, voice full of calm. It's earned by standing back up, by choosing love, even after betrayal. I nodded. And peace? I asked. She smiled. Peace is what you get when you finally stop asking for permission to be whole.